Back to Piscean's amazing advanced astrology and philosophy channel. With peace and love, subscribe, like, comment, share my videos. And we're going to get started on this. This is a page in my book, Piscean's Base Philosophy on Mortality, More Existential Stuffs. And this is a philosophical manual for the study of being across worlds, being a method for understanding life, intelligence, and value in terrestrial and extraterrestrial contexts. I call it the Archeon Cosmologia. Yes. Excuse me. We'll begin with our frontispiece, authorial note. This manual is conceived not as a system of doctrines, but as a method of inquiry. It proceeds from the conviction that philosophy, having long served as the handmaiden of human self-understanding, must now expand its purview to compass life wherever it may arise. The pages that follow offer a rigorous framework for this expansion, a framework built upon the foundational insights of ancient thinkers, refined through the critical developments of modern philosophy, and oriented toward the questions that await us among the stars. The manual is divided into 3 principal sections: the codex containing the core philosophical method, the appendixes providing specialized applications and case studies, and the Lexidion offering definitions of key terms. References to ancient and modern sources are provided throughout, not as ornaments but as tools. Each citation marks a pathway into the tradition upon which this method builds. And here's our prolegomena on the necessity of astrophilosophy. The limitation of terrestrial thought. Philosophy, strictly speaking, has until now been restrained by the frames of a single species. The categories through which we apprehend being, the logics through which we reason, the values through which we judge, all have been developed within the horizon of Homo sapiens and under the gravitational pull of a single planetary context. This is not to dismiss the achievements of terrestrial philosophy, which remain considerable, but to recognize their limitation. As Ian von Heckner has argued, philosophy has been subject to an unrecognized anthropomorphism, just as biology has been subject to a geocentrism that pervades our very perception of life. The discovery that our sun is but one star among billions and our planet but one world among countless others has gradually compelled a Copernican revolution in our thinking about the cosmos. Yet philosophy has been slower than astronomy to absorb this lesson. While we no longer place Earth at the physical center of the universe, we continue in our habits of thought to place terrestrial life, and specifically human life, at the conceptual center of all possible being. Now I want to talk about the n=1 problem and its consequences. So this anthropocentrism, confronts a fundamental epistemological obstacle, alright? The problem of reasoning from a single case. Our knowledge of life is derived from exactly one example, the terrestrial biosphere. This is the so-called n=1 problem. From the single instance, we cannot determine which features of life are universal and which are contingent products of Earth's particular history. The difficulty is not merely empirical but conceptual. When we ask what life is, we have only one instantiation from which to generalize. When we ask what intelligence might be, we have only one cognitive architecture from which to extrapolate. The risk of overgeneralization is acute, as Christopher Coe has shown in his critique of the big numbers argument. If we infer from Earth's possession of life that life must be common elsewhere, we must by the same logic infer that Earth's precise quantity of water or its possession of shoelaces is equally common, a manifest absurdity. So now let's get into the bifurcation of inquiry. The response to this limitation cannot be to abandon the search for extraterrestrial life to empirical science alone, nor to retreat into purely speculative philosophy. What is required is a bifurcation of inquiry into 2 complementary but distinct disciplines: Astrobiology concerns itself with the empirical search for life beyond Earth, the detection of biosignatures, the study of extremophiles, the modeling of planetary habitability. Its methods are those of the natural sciences: observation, experiment, hypothesis testing. Astrophilosophy concerns itself with the conceptual questions that arise from the search. Questions about the nature of life, the possibility of alternative forms of intelligence, the grounds of moral considerably, the implications for human self-understanding. Its methods are those of philosophy: conceptual analysis, logical reasoning, phenomenological description, axiological reflection. And these disciplines are not competitors but partners. Astrobiology provides scenarios and constraints that philosophy must take seriously. Astrophilosophy provides the conceptual framework within which astrobiological findings can be interpreted and their implications understood. I said I was going to quit smoking cigarettes and I didn't yet. The purpose of this manual. This manual offers a method for conducting astrophilosophical inquiry with rigor. It does not provide answers to the questions it raises. Such answers, if they are possible at all, must emerge from sustained investigation. What it provides is a set of tools, distinctions, arguments, frameworks, and heuristics that can guide inquiry and prevent common errors. The method proceeds in 4 stages. Historical grounding, situating questions within the tradition of philosophical reflection, drawing upon ancient, medieval, and modern sources. Conceptual analysis, clarifying the terms and distinctions necessary for rigorous inquiry. Modal exploration, investigating the range of possibilities consistent with what we know. Axiological reflection, considering questions of value, meaning, and responsibility. Each stage draws upon the resource of philosophical tradition while extending them toward new questions. The result is not a new system, but a methodos, a way of proceeding that can be adapted to diverse inquiries. And now I introduce my codex. Alright, Liber Primus Fundamenta. Caput 1 on the ancient sources of cosmic philosophy. Let's start with Ptolemy, the empiricist. It is a common error to remember Ptolemy only as an astronomer whose geocentric model was eventually superseded. This is to mistake the fate of his conclusions for the character of his method. Ptolemy was, in the first instance, a self-identified philosopher who addressed many of the most pressing philosophical questions of his time and propounded ideas unprecedented in ancient Greek philosophy. Ptolemy's significance for cosmic philosophy lies in his synthesis of traditions. He neither affiliated himself with a single school nor proclaimed himself an eclectic, as did his contemporary Galen. Instead, he adopted Platonic, Aristotelian, and Stoic ideas in a manner shaped by his own philosophical concerns. In fact, modern scholars have characterized his position as that of a Platonic empiricist, one who combines commitment to transcend forms with rigorous attention to empirical observation. This synthesis has profound implications for the study of life beyond Earth. Ptolemy demonstrates that empirical rigor and philosophical reflection are complementary, not opposed. Synthesis across traditions can yield insights unavailable within any single school. Mathematical modeling of cosmic phenomena is compatible with philosophical attention to their meaning. For the astrophilosopher, Ptolemy offers a model of how to move between the particular and the universal, the observed and the infrared, without losing oneself in either. Alright, the Platonic inheritance. That's a more comfortable position. Alright. Plato's influence on Ptolemy was substantial. And through Ptolemy, it enters the tradition of cosmic philosophy. The Platonic distinction between the sensible world of becoming and the intelligible world of being raises questions that become urgent when we consider life elsewhere. If forms exist, do they exist for all possible beings? Is the form of life itself instantiated differently in different cosmic contexts, or does each species participate in the form according to its own mode of being? These questions cannot be answered by empirical means alone. They require the dialectical method that Plato himself pioneered, the movement between hypothesis and their examination, between examples and the principles they exemplify. The Aristotelian contribution. Aristotle's biology, though based entirely on terrestrial organisms, provides conceptual resources for thinking about life in general. His distinction between nutritive, sensitive, and rational souls offers a framework for classifying forms of life according to their capacities rather than their material composition. More important for cosmic philosophy is Aristotle's method of proceeding from what is better known to us to what is better known by nature. We begin with terrestrial life because it is what we have. We reason toward the principles of life as such. We then apply these principles to the interpretation of possible extraterrestrial life. This movement from the familiar to the universal and back to the unfamiliar is the pattern of all sound astrophilosophical inquiry. The Stoic taught that the cosmos itself is a living being, ensouled by a rational principle of the Logos. This vision of cosmic unity anticipates modern conceptions of the universe as an interconnected whole within which life emerges as a natural expression of fundamental principles. For the astrophilosopher, Stoicism offers resources for thinking about cosmic citizenship, the idea that we are citizens not only of particular politics but of the cosmos itself, natural law, the possibility of norms that hold for all rational beings regardless of their biological constitution, cosmopolitan ethics, the extension of moral considerably beyond one's immediate community. Alright. So, Caput 2 on the medieval and Renaissance transmission. We're going to talk about Islamic preservation and critique. The philosophical tradition did not pass directly from antiquity to modernity. It was preserved, developed, and criticized by Islamic philosophers whose contributions remain insufficiently appreciated in the West. The Islamic reception of Ptolemy was neither passive nor reverent. Scholars subjected his works to rigorous critique, identifying imprecisions and proposing alternatives. This critical engagement, respectful of tradition yet unwilling to accept authority uncritically, provides a model for contemporary astrophilosophy. We must engage seriously with the tradition while remaining alert to its limitations. The Renaissance recovery. The recovery of ancient texts during the Renaissance and their integration with new observations prepared the ground for the scientific revolution. Figures like Giovanni Pico da Mirandola subjected Ptolemy's astrological work to searching criticism, while others continued to find value in his methods. This period teaches us that progress requires both preservation and critique. The tradition is a resource, not a prison. Caput 3 on the emergence of modern cosmic thought. The Copernican principle. Copernicus's displacement of Earth from the center of the cosmos had philosophical implications that extended far beyond astronomy. The Copernican principle, the assumption that Earth and its inhabitants are not privileged observers of the universe, became a regulative ideal for cosmic thinking. For astrophilosophy, the Copernican principle entails epistemic humility, recognition that our perspective may be limited or atypical, methodological anti-anthropocentrism, suspicion of arguments that privilege human categories, openness to alterity, readiness to encounter forms of life and intelligence that may differ radically from our own. Yet the Copernican principle must be applied with care. As critics have noted, the inference from Earth is not central to Earth is typical is not logically compulsory. We must distinguish between the claim that Earth is not privileged, which is well supported, and the claim that Earth is typical, which remains to be established. The Darwinian Revolution. Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection transformed our understanding of life's origin and development. For cosmic philosophy, its implications are profound. Life is not fixed, but historical. Species arise and pass away. Forms of life are contingent products of particular histories. Intelligence is not inevitable. The capacities we value most highly are evolutionary accidents, not necessary outcomes. Common descent explains commonality. Similarities among terrestrial organisms reflect shared ancestry, not universal principles. These insights constrain speculation about extraterrestrial life. We cannot assume that evolution elsewhere will produce intelligence, consciousness, or moral agency. These are local products of a particular planetary history. The emergence of astrobiology. The 20th century saw the gradual emergence of astrobiology as a scientific discipline. Initially subsumed with philosophy, astrobiology increasingly became an observational and experimental activity focused on the link between life and the cosmos. This development reflects a movement away from geocentrism in biology. Just as Copernicus displaced Earth from the center of the cosmos, astrobiology displaces terrestrial life from the center of biological thought. We can now ask which features of life are universal, which are products of Earth's particular conditions, which might vary across cosmic contexts. For Liber Secundus, we have Methodus, where we're going over our methods. Alright? Liber Secundus. So, Caput 4. On the structure of astrophilosophical inquiry. The fourfold method. Astrophilosophical inquiry proceeds through 4 interrelated stages. Historical grounding. Before addressing any question, we must understand how it has been addressed before. The tradition of philosophy contains resources that cannot be replaced by independent reflection. As Whitehead observed, the European philosophical tradition consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. While this overstates the case, it captures an important truth. We think within traditions, not outside them. Historical grounding serves 3 purposes: avoiding repetition, much apparent novelty is rediscovery of what was already known; identifying assumptions, traditions revealed their presuppositions over time. English folks. Accessing alternatives, past thinkers conceive possibilities we have forgotten. And it's funny because I went to a Spanish immersion growing up, from elementary through high school, so technically Spanish is more the language I understand, believe it or not. So, conceptual analysis. With historical context established, we proceed to analysis of the concepts involved. What do we mean by life, by intelligence, by value? These terms are not self-interpreting, they require careful examination. Conceptual analysis proceeds through definition, clarifying the meaning of terms; distinction, differentiating concepts that might be confused; connection, showing relations among concepts. Third is modal exploration. Having clarified our concepts, we explore the space of possibilities they delimit. What forms might life take? What varieties of intelligence are conceivable? This is not mere speculation, but disciplined modal reasoning, constrained by empirical knowledge, what we know about the universe, logical consistency, what can be coherently conceived, theoretical principles, what our best theories allow, axiological reflection. Finally, we consider questions of value. If life exists elsewhere, what obligations might we have toward it? If we can encounter intelligence, how should we respond to this? If we find no life, what meaning does this have? Axiological reflection draws upon ethical theory, aesthetics, and philosophy of reason. It asks not only what is the case, but what matters. The principle of methodological complementarity. Astrobiology and astrophilosophy are complementary, not competitive. Each has its own methods and rigor, each informs the other. The astrophilosopher must take seriously the empirical findings of astrobiology, respect the autonomy of scientific inquiry, contribute conceptual resources that enable interpretation of scientific results. The relationship is one of mutual dependence. Astrobiology without philosophy cannot interpret its findings. Philosophy without astrobiology cannot ground its speculations. Right. Caput 5. On the problem of defining life. The difficulty of definition. What is life? The question appears simple but resists easy answer. Definitions proliferate, yet none commands universal assent. This is not merely a failure of philosophical ingenuity, but reflects the nature of the subject. The difficulty has several sources. Life is not a natural kind. There may be no essence common to all living things. Life is historical. Living things are products of evolution, not instances of a fixed type. Life is graded. The boundary between living and non-living is not sharp. Life is known from one example. We have only terrestrial life from which to generalize. Proposed definitions and their limitations. Several definitions have been proposed, each with characteristic strengths and weaknesses. Metabolic definitions focus on life as a system that processes energy and matter to maintain itself. These capture something central but struggle with dormant life. Spores, cryopreserved organisms. And genetic definitions focus on life as a system that stores and transmits information. These capture reproduction and evolution, but may include computer viruses. Autopoietic definitions focus on life as a system that produces and maintains itself. These capture self-organization, but may include non-living systems such as fire and or hurricanes, natural disasters and shit. Thermodynamic definitions focus on life as a system that maintains order by dissipating energy. And these connect life to fundamental physics, but may be too broad. Alright. A methodological approach. Given these difficulties, a methodological approach is preferable to a substantive definition. Rather than asking, what is life, we ask, what questions do we need to answer? The definition of life becomes operational. Life is whatever we need to study to answer our questions. This approach avoids premature closure. We do not decide in advance what counts. Permits contextual definition. Different inquiries may require different criteria. Remains open to discovery. We can recognize life without defining it. As Valerio de Lauro argues, we should approach the definition of life from an epistemological perspective, avoiding a rigid ontological framework and accepting the possibility of contextual definitions. Alright. On to Caput 6, which is on the logic of inference from single cases. The n equals 1 problem. The fundamental epistemological challenge of astrophilosophy, it is the n equals 1 problem. We have exactly one example of a life-bearing planet from which to generalize. This limits our ability to draw conclusions about life elsewhere. The problem is not merely statistical but logic. It's all logical. It's not statistical. From a single case, we cannot distinguish universal features, properties that all life must have, local features, properties that are products of particular conditions, and accidental features, properties that are historical contingencies. Alright. The principle of mediocrity and its critics. One response to the n equals 1 problem is the principle of mediocrity, or Copernican principle. We should assume that Earth is typical unless we have reason to think otherwise. If Earth hosts life, then life is probably common. This principle has been subjected to decisive criticism. As Christopher Coy argues, following Roy Mash, the principle of mediocrity overgeneralizes. If it licenses inference from Earth hosts life to life is common, it also licenses inference from Earth has precisely z gallons of water to planets with precisely z gallons of water are common, an absurd result. Moreover, Earth is not a random sample of planets. Our existence biases the sample. We could only have observed a planet that supports observers. This is the observation selection effect. Yes, our data point is not representative because it's being observed depends on its having the properties we are investigating. Let's talk about a more modest inference. What inferences are legitimate from n equals 1? The answer lies in moving from quantitative to qualitative reasoning. We cannot infer frequencies. How common life is cannot be determined from one case. We can infer possibilities. That life exists shows that it is possible. We can identify necessary conditions. We can investigate what life requires and search for those conditions elsewhere. We can generate hypotheses. Our single case suggests what to look for. The proper attitude is what a tempered optimism, confidence that life is possible, openness to its discovery, but skepticism about claims that it must be common. Alright, 7 on the interpretation of biosignatures. what would count as evidence? The search for ET life proceeds through the detection of biosignatures, indicators that could be produced by life, and these include atmospheric gases out of equilibrium, for example, oxygen and methane together, surface features suggesting biological activity, complex organic molecules, technological signals, technosignatures. The interpretation of biosignatures requires careful reasoning about alternatives. A signal that can be produced by life might also be produced by non-biological processes. The problem of alternative explanations for any putative biosignature, we must consider abiotic processes, non-biological mechanisms that can produce the same effect, instrumental artifacts, features introduced by our measuring devices, statistical flukes, random variations that mimic signals. The history of science teaches humility. Canals on Mars, Viking lander biology experiments, and other apparent detections have taught us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Inference to the best explanation. The logic of biosignature interpretation is inference to the best explanation. We compare hypotheses. So H1, H2, and H3, we see H1 is the signals produced by life. H2, the signals produced by non-biological processes, and H3, the signal is an artifact of measurement. We choose the hypothesis that best explains the data according to criteria such as explanatory power, does it account for what we observe? Simplicity, does it require fewer assumptions? Consistency, is it consistent with other knowledge? Fruitfulness, does it generate testable predictions? This is not deductive proof, but probabilistic reasoning. We become more or less confident as evidence accumulates. So, on to kaput 8, which is on the varieties of possible life. Carbon chauvinism and its limits. Discussions of ET life often assume carbon-based chemistry. This is reasonable, but not compulsory. Carbon's ability to form complex molecules makes it a promising basis for life, but alternatives are conceivable. Silicon-based life. Silicon shares carbon's tetravalence but forms weaker bonds. Ammonia-based solvents. Ammonia could substitute for water in some temperature ranges. Non-chemical life, plasma-based or electromagnetic forms have been speculated. The methodological principle is one of openness without credulity. We should not assume that only terrestrial biochemistry is possible, but we should also recognize that some possibilities are more plausible than others, given what we know. All right. On the range of possible biologies, even with carbon-based chemistry, the range of possible life is vast. Terrestrial life shares common ancestry, so its features may not be universal. Possible variations include alternative genetic codes. The genetic code is not necessary. Other codes are possible. Different chiralities. Terrestrial life uses left-handed amino acids. Right-handed life is conceivable. Varied metabolic pathways. The biochemical solutions life has found are a subset of what is possible. From biology to intelligence. Intelligence is not an inevitable outcome of evolution. Terrestrial history suggests it is rare and contingent. The conditions that favored its emergence here, tool use, social living, environmental change, may not be common. Moreover, intelligence might take forms very different from our own. Collective intelligence distributed across many individuals. Embedded intelligence not separable from environmental engagement. Alien cognition operating with different logics, concepts, and goals. We must be cautious in projecting human categories onto possible others. Right. Kaput 9 on intelligence and its recognition. Defining intelligence. Alright. Like life, intelligence resists simple definition. Working characterizations include problem-solving capacity, ability to achieve goals in complex environments, learning ability, capacity to modify behavior based on experience, abstract reasoning, manipulation of symbols and concepts, consciousness, subjective experience, more controversial. These may not co-vary. A system might solve problems without consciousness or be conscious without abstract reasoning. The problem of alien minds. Recognizing intelligence in others requires overcoming several obstacles, right? The other mind's problem. We cannot directly access others' mental states, even on Earth. The alien mind's problem. ET intelligence might be organized so differently that recognition is difficult. The communication problem. We might not share a medium or framework for exchange. As Susan Schneider has argued, alien minds might be so different that we fail to recognize them as minds at all. Right. Methodological principles for intelligence recognition. Given these difficulties, a method for intelligence recognition should include behavioral criteria, observable indicators of intelligence, structural criteria, organization that supports intelligent processing, communicative criteria, capacity for exchange of information, inferential modesty, willingness to revise judgments. The default assumption should be caution. Better to miss some intelligence than to mistakenly attribute it where it does not exist. Alright, put 10 on value and moral considerability. The scope of moral considerability. If ET life exists, what moral obligations might we have toward it? This question requires us to consider the grounds of moral considerability. Traditional candidates include sentience, capacity to experience pleasure and pain, rationality, capacity for reasoning and choice, life itself, being alive regardless of other capacities, autopoiesis, self-organization, and self-maintenance. Each ground yields different applications for ET life. Sentience as a moral threshold. If sentience is a ground of moral considerability, then we must determine which ET life forms are sentient. This is difficult. We cannot directly observe other subjective experience. A precautionary approach is warranted where sentience is possible. We should assume it unless we have strong evidence otherwise. This minimizes the risk of causing unjustified suffering. On to rationality and moral agency. If rationality is the ground, then only beings capable of reasoning and choice are morally considerable. This would exclude many terrestrial animals and possibly many ET life forms, but rationality might take device forms. A being need not reason exactly as humans do to be rational. We must be open to alien forms of reasoning, whatever that looks like. Biocentrism and its implications. If life itself is the ground, then all living beings have moral standing regardless of their capacities. This view, associated with Albert Schweitzer and others, extends moral considerably to the simplest organisms. Applied to ET life, biocentrism would imply that even microbial life deserves moral consideration. This has practical implications for planetary protection and sample return. In a pluralist framework, given uncertainty about the correct grounds of moral considerability, a pluralist framework is advisable. We should recognize multiple sources of value and multiple grounds of obligation. This does not mean that everything is equally valuable, but that we must consider diverse considerations in our moral reasoning. Alright. On communication and understanding, the problem of interspecies communication. Communication with ET intelligence faces obstacles beyond those of human communication. Different sensory modalities, what we see, they might hear. What we hear, they might feel. Different conceptual schemes, their categories might not map onto ours. Different cognitive architectures, their reasoning might proceed differently. Different evolutionary histories, their purposes and values might be unlike ours. The role of mathematics. Mathematics has often been proposed as a universal language. Its claims are abstract and appear independent of particular biology. If ETs do mathematics, we might share a common reference point, but this hope faces difficulties. Mathematics might be culturally variable. Different mathematical traditions exist even on Earth. Mathematics might be embodied. Our mathematics reflects our sensory motor experience. Mathematics might be interpreted differently. Same symbols, different meanings. Hermeneutic charity. The principle of hermeneutic charity, interpreting others' communications in the way that makes them most rational, provides a method for approaching alien messages. We should assume that they are trying to communicate, interpret their signals in the most coherent way possible, revise interpretations in light of further evidence, remain open to the possibility of failure. Communication may not be possible. We must be prepared for this outcome. On silence and its meanings, the Fermi paradox. Enrico Fermi's question, where is everybody, captures a puzzle. If life is common, why have we not detected it? This is the Fermi paradox. Various resolutions have been proposed. Life is rare. The conditions for life are uncommon. Intelligence is rare. Life is common, but intelligence is not. Civilizations are short-lived. Technological civilizations destroy themselves. They are not signaling. They have no interest in communication. They are signaling, but we cannot detect it. Our technology is inadequate. They are here, but unrecognized. We have already encountered them without knowing. Alright. In the Great Filter Hypothesis, it suggests that at some point in the development from simple life to interstellar civilization, there is a barrier that is extremely difficult to pass. This filter could be behind us in our past, for example, the origin of life, the emergence of eukaryotes, I think, ahead of us, in our future, for example, technological self-destruction, and elsewhere faced by others, but perhaps not by us. The location of the Great Filter has implications for our future. If it lies ahead, we may be at risk. Philosophical responses to silence. Well, silence is not merely an empirical puzzle, but a philosophical challenge. It raises questions about our place in the cosmos. Are we alone? What does this mean? Our responsibilities, if we are alone, do we have special obligations? Our future, what can we learn from silence about our prospects? The proper response is neither despair nor complacency, but continued inquiry combined with humility about our ability to resolve the paradox. Alright, so now I'm going to go through the Liber Tertius Axiologia on cosmic value, intrinsic and instrumental value. Value can be understood in two primary senses. Intrinsic value, worth in itself independently of use. Instrumental value, worth as a means to something else. ET life might have both. It might be valuable for what it is, intrinsic, and for what it can teach us or enable, instrumental. The value of diversity. Biodiversity on Earth is valued for multiple reasons. Cosmic biodiversity, the variety of life across worlds, might be valuable in analogous ways. Scientific value, each new form of life teaches us about life's possibilities. Aesthetic value, the beauty of diverse life forms. Intrinsic value, each life form has worth in itself. Existential value, knowing that we are not alone, matters to us. The value of intelligence. Intelligent life might have distinctive value, moral agency, capacity to recognize and respond to value. Cultural creation, production of art, science, philosophy. Cosmic significance, intelligence as the universe becoming conscious of itself. But what we must be careful not to overvalue intelligence at the expense of other forms of life. Simple life has value too. On human significance in cosmic context. The anthropic question. What is the significance of humanity in a cosmos that may contain other life? Several possibilities present themselves. We are unique. No other life exists. We are alone. We are typical. Life is common. We are one among many. We are peripheral. Life exists, but we are not central to cosmic history. We are transitional. We are a stage in cosmic development, not its end. Each possibility has different implications for human self-understanding. Cosmic humility. The Copernican tradition teaches humility. We are not the center of the cosmos, physically or perhaps metaphysically. This need not be deflating. It can be liberating. We are part of something larger than ourselves. Cosmic humility involves epistemic humility, recognizing the limits of our knowledge. Moral humility, acknowledging that we may not be the only moral community. Existential humility, accepting that our significance may be local rather than cosmic. Cosmic responsibility. If we are alone, we bear special responsibility. The only life, the only intelligence, the only moral agent in the cosmos may be here. This confers obligations to preserve life, protect the only living planet, to extend life, perhaps seed other worlds, to realize value, make the most of our unique position. If we are not alone, our responsibilities expand to include relations with others. We must learn to live as one moral community among many. On the future of cosmic philosophy, the continuing need for method. As empirical discovery proceeds, the need for philosophical method does not diminish. New findings require interpretation, new possibilities require conceptual exploration, new challenges require ethical reflection. The method outlined in this manual is not a substitute for empirical inquiry, but its complement. It provides tools for thinking about what we find and what we might find. So we have our open questions here, and many questions remain open. Is life a cosmic imperative or a cosmic accident? Is intelligence a convergent outcome or a contingent rarity? Is value objective or projected? Are we alone? These questions cannot be answered by the philosophy alone, nor by the science alone. They require the collaboration of both. An invitation. This manual is an invitation to inquiry, not a compendium of conclusions. Its method is offered for use, criticism, and refinement. The questions it addresses are among the most important we face. They deserve our best thinking. And on to our appendixes. Pretty sure it's A through F. So Appendix A is a historical lexicon of cosmic philosophy. I'm giving definitions here. Alright, we see that anthropocentrism is the view that human beings are the central or most significant entities in the cosmos. Astrophilosophy seeks to overcome the anthropocentrism that has historically limited philosophy. Astrobiology, the scientific study of life in the universe, including its origins, distribution, and future, combines astronomy, biology, and planetary science. Astrophilosophy, philosophical inquiry informed by astrobiological perspectives, addresses questions about the nature of life, intelligence, and value in cosmic contexts. Autopoiesis, self-creation or self-maintenance, proposed as a defining feature of living systems. Biosignature, any substance, element, molecule, or feature that provides scientific evidence of past or present life. Carbon chauvinism, the assumption that ET life must be carbon-based, like terrestrial life. Copernican principle, the assumption that Earth and its inhabitants are not privileged observers of the universe. Extended to philosophy, it suggests that human thought is not privileged. Drake equation, a probabilistic argument used to estimate the number of active communicative ET civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. Alright, Fermi paradox. It's the apparent contradiction between high estimates of the probability of ET civilizations and the lack of evidence for such civilizations. Geocentrism. In biology, the assumption that terrestrial life is typical or paradigmatic. Astrophilosophy seeks to overcome this limitation. Great filter. A hypothetical event or condition that prevents life from evolving to an interstellar civilization. Great silence, the absence of detectable signals from ET intelligence. Habitable zone, the region around a star where planetary surface temperatures allow liquid water to exist. LUCA, last universal common ancestor, the most recent population of organisms from which all life on Earth descends. N=1 problem, the epistemological challenge of reasoning about life from only one known example, terrestrial life. Observation selection effect, bias introduced by the fact that our observations are possible only because of conditions that may not be typical. Principle of mediocrity, the assumption that Earth and its inhabitants are typical of cosmic phenomena related to the Copernican principle, but stronger. Sentience, the capacity to have subjective experiences, particularly pleasure and pain, often proposed as a ground for moral considerably. Shadow biosphere, a hypothetical microbial biosphere on Earth that uses biochemical processes fundamentally different from known life. Technosignature, any measurable property or effect that provides evidence of past or present technology. Appendix B, chronology of cosmic philosophy. So we see here, circa 370 BCE, Plato writes Timaeus, presenting a cosmological vision of the universe as a living being. Circa 350 BCE, Aristotle's biological works established a systematic study of life. Circa 150 CE, Ptolemy synthesizes Platonic, Aristotelian, and Stoic philosophy with astronomical observation. 9th through 12th centuries, Islamic scholars preserve, develop, and critique Greek philosophical and astronomical works. 1543, Copernicus publishes De Revolutionibus, displacing Earth from the center of the cosmos. 1600, Giordano Bruno burned at the stake, having argued for an infinite universe with countless worlds. 1687, Newton's Principia provides a mathematical framework for cosmic mechanics. 1859, Darwin's Origin of Species transforms understanding of life's development. 1950, Enrico Fermi poses his famous question, "Where is everybody?" 1961, Frank Drake formulates the Drake equation. 1992, first confirmed detection of exoplanets. 1993, Roy Mash publishes Philosophical Critique of Optimism about ET Intelligence. 2015, Stephen Dick edits The Impact of Discovering Life Beyond Earth, bringing together multidisciplinary perspectives. 2019, Ian von Hegner proposes bifurcation of astrobiology and astrophilosophy. 2024, Christopher Coe Renault's Philosophical Critique of Optimism in Light of Exoplanet Discoveries. And in 2025, Valerio de Lauro systematically addresses the N=1 problem and proposes new frameworks for astrobiological investigation. Right, Appendix C is case studies and astrophilosophical method. And our first case study is the interpretation of atmospheric biosignatures. So we look at our scenario, which is the James Webb Space Telescope detecting an atmosphere with oxygen and methane in disequilibrium on an exoplanet in the habitable zone. Our historical grounding, we recall that similar disequilibrium on Earth is maintained by life, but we also recall the Viking lander results, where initial positive signals were later reinterpreted. Conceptual analysis, what do we mean by biosignature? A signal that could be produced by life. This is not the same as a signal that must be produced by life. Modal exploration, what abiotic processes could produce the signal, photochemical reactions, geological activity, volcanic outgassing. Are these plausible given other data about the planet? Axiological reflection, if life is present, what obligations must we have? Should we avoid contamination? Should we attempt communication? The signal warrants further investigation but not certainty. We must consider alternative explanations and gather additional data. Our second case study is the discovery of microbial life on Mars. A sample return mission from Mars contains organisms clearly related to but distinct from terrestrial life. We recall debates about life on Mars from the 19th century onward. We remember how earlier claims were received. What does related mean here? If the organisms share DNA, they share common ancestry with terrestrial life, suggesting either contamination or interplanetary transfer. If they do not share DNA, what does this imply? Independent origin, different biochemistry? The range of possibilities expands. Does microbial life have moral standing? Should we modify it, study it, preserve it? The discovery would transform biology and philosophy. It would provide a second data point, moving us from N=1 to N=2. And our third and final case study here is a signal from the stars. A SETI project detects a structured signal that cannot be attributed to known natural sources. We recall the WOW signal and other candidate detections that did not repeat. We remember the history of claims about Martian canals. What would count as evidence of intelligence, structure, complexity, information content, learning? Could natural processes produce this signal? Pulsars were once thought possibly artificial. What alternatives exist? If the signal is intelligent, should we respond? Who speaks for Earth? What should we say? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Verification, replication, and elimination of alternatives are essential before drawing conclusions. And Appendix D is a great debate, selections from the literature. D.I. Roy Mash on the Limits of Optimism, 1993, From Big Numbers and the Search for ET Intelligence. The inference from lots of sites to non-negligible quantities of intelligent life isn't strictly valid. Interim promises would be required. And when one examines the existing attempts to provide those premises, what one finds is underwhelming. Ian van Hegner on the emergence of astrophilosophy, from astrobiology and astrophilosophy subsuming or bifurcating disciplines. Philosophy has, strictly speaking, been restrained by the frames for one species, Homo sapiens. Thus, philosophy has, strictly speaking, been anthropomorphic. Thus, when philosophy, like astrobiology, incorporates the Copernican principle, assuming that terrestrial life and the thinking of Homo sapiens is not privileged in the universe, astrophilosophy emerges. Christopher Coe on the persistence of the problem, From Optimism in the Search for ET Life, a Philosophical Perspective. Despite scientific advances in recent decades, the spirit of Mash's case stands and optimism remains undersupported. Valerio Di Laro on the N=1 problem, From Beyond the Unique Evidence, a Philosophy of ET Life. Our biological knowledge is based on a single example, which implies the so-called N=1 problem, the impossibility of determining whether Earth's biosphere is representative of life on a universal scale. Appendix E, Axiological Frameworks for Cosmic Encounters. Let's talk about the precautionary principle. When uncertain about the effects of our actions, we should err on the side of caution. Applied to ET life, avoid contamination until we understand potential impacts, assume moral considerably in cases of uncertainty, proceed slowly and deliberately in contact scenarios. The principle of non-interference, respect the autonomy of other life forms and civilizations, do not intervene in their development unless necessary to prevent greater harm. This principle, analogous to the prime directive in science fiction, recognizes the value of self-determination. The principle of universal respect, treat all life forms with respect appropriate to their capacities. This does not mean treating all alike, but responding appropriately to each according to its nature. The principle of cosmic hospitality, welcome others into the community of moral consideration, extend the circle of concern outward, recognize that we may be guests in others' worlds as they may be guests in ours. In Appendix F, a methodological checklist for astrophilosophical inquiry. Appendix F is our methodological checklist for astrophilosophical inquiry. Before inquiry, have I consulted relevant historical sources? Have I identified my assumptions? Have I clarified the concepts I will use? Have I considered alternative frameworks? And during inquiry, am I distinguishing what is known from what is assumed? Am I considering the range of possibilities consistent with evidence? Am I avoiding overgeneralization from a single case? Am I attending to observation selection effects? Or am I attending to my terrible speech impediment? Am I remaining open to conclusions that challenge my preferences? And after inquiry, have I considered the axiological implications of my conclusions? Have I identified remaining uncertainties? Have I suggested directions for further inquiry? Have I communicated my findings clearly and humbly? Now we'll finish this with our Lexidium, where I, just give you some words to think about. I will say our colophon, though. The manual was composed in the conviction that philosophy must expand to meet the questions of a cosmic age. Its method draws upon 2 millennia of philosophical reflection while extending that reflection toward questions its authors could not have anticipated. The work is offered as a beginning, not an end. Its categories will require refinement, its methods improvement, its conclusions revision. This is as it should be. Philosophy is not a system of doctrines, but a way of inquiry, a way that now leads us toward the stars while keeping us rooted in the best of terrestrial thought. May those who use this manual do so with humility, rigor, and wonder. The questions it addresses are among the most important we can ask. They deserve nothing less than our best efforts, sustained over generations, in dialogue across disciplines, and perhaps someday across worlds. So, our Lexidium. Alien, from Latin alienus, belonging to another. In astrophilosophy, any entity not originating on Earth. The term carries no negative connotations. Anthropic principle, the observation that the universe's fundamental constants are compatible with our existence, sometimes interpreted as having explanatory significance. Anthropomorphism, attribution of human characteristics to non-human entities, a persistent risk in thinking about ET life. Axiology, the philosophical study of value, including ethics, aesthetics, and related fields. Biosignature, any measurable phenomena that indicates the presence of life. contingency, the property of being dependent on particular historical circumstances rather than necessary. Much of terrestrial life is contingent. Cosmopolitanism, the view that all beings belong to a single community regardless of their origin. Emergence, the appearance of novel properties at higher levels of organization, not predictable from lower levels. Epistemology, the philosophical study of knowledge, including its nature, sources, and limits. Exoplanet, a planet orbiting a star other than the Sun. Extremophile, an organism that thrives in conditions extreme from human perspective, suggesting the range of possible habitats for life. Geocentrism, in astrophilosophy, the assumption that terrestrial life is pragmatic, a limitation to be overcome. Hermeneutics, the theory and method of interpretation relevant to understanding alien communication. Intelligence, capacity for learning, reasoning, problem-solving, and sometimes consciousness, resists simple definition. Mediocrity principle, the assumption that Earth and its inhabitants are typical, distinguished from the weaker Copernican principle. Metaphysics, the philosophical study of fundamental reality, including being, existence, and causation. Modal logic, the study of necessity and possibility, tools for exploring what forms life might take. N=1 problem, the challenge of reasoning from a single example of life. Ontology, the philosophical study of being and existence. Panspermia, the hypothesis that life spreads between planets via natural processes. Phenomenology, the philosophical study of conscious experience, relevant to understanding alien consciousness if it exists. Sentience, the capacity for subjective experience, especially pleasure and pain, often proposed as a ground for moral considerably. Technosignature, evidence of technology such as radio signals or megastructures. Teleology, explanation in terms of purpose or goal, historically important in philosophy of life. Universal, that which applies across all cases. The search for universals in biology is complicated by N=1. Value, worth, or importance. Intrinsic value is worth in itself. Instrumental value is worth as a means. Thank you for watching this video with peace and love. Make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and share if you dare. And I'll see you in the next one, teaching you more astrology and philosophy, or whatever the fuck, for free.